In a small English city, an artist named Mark wakes up to his neighbor Enid shouting his name to the thin wall, saying something strange is happening outside. Half asleep and annoyed, he brushes her off and rolls out of bed. The flat is unusually quiet. When Mark tries the light switch, nothing happens. The power is out. He goes to open his window for some air, but it won't budge. It feels glued shut. Peering through the glass, he spots a man in the opposite building frantically pounding on his own window, as if trapped. Mark dismisses him as some weirdo having a meltdown. He heads to the kitchen for tea, but the tap is dry. No water. He opens a fridge and is hit with a sour smell. The milk has already spoiled without electricity. Giving up on breakfast, he gets dressed while listening to Enid ramble nervously next door. His alarm never went off, so he realizes he's late. As he grabs his things to leave, his phone rings. It's his ex-wife. She tears into him for being an unreliable father and not showing up when he's supposed to see their child. Mark tries to calm her down and promises he's on his way, but when he reaches her front door and pulls, it doesn't move at all. He tugs harder and sees the problem. Some strange, rubbery-looking substance has sealed the door frame completely. Before he can process it, a painful screech erupts from his phone speaker and the call cuts off. Mark moves to try the landline, but it's dead too. He looks back outside and notices more and more neighbors struggling with their windows and doors, all stuck shut. It hits him. Everyone has been sealed into their homes. Down on the street, people in hazmat suits patrol between buildings, carefully organized. Mark calls for Enid through the wall, but instead of an answer, he hears a crash in her flat, then silence. Panicking, he grabs his tools and starts hacking at the material around his door. He's suddenly startled by a voice crackling through the building's intercom, and surprise makes him slam his hand with a hammer, cutting it badly. The voice repeats calmly that everything is under control and everyone must stay inside. As Mark wraps his bleeding hand, his wall trembles. A chunk of plaster gives way and a hole opens up. On the other side, Mark sees Sergei and his younger brother Niku peering in. Sergei climbs through, quickly checks Mark's windows, and curses when he finds them sealed too. Mark squeezes through to Sergei's flat and checks his door. Same problem. Before they can form a plan, another couple appears through the hole. Sally and her partner Aiden, both from neighboring flats. Aiden immediately starts ranting that the government must have set up signal jammers to stop people from posting the truth. He storms off, moving from room to room, arms stretched up at his phone, hunting for any signal. The intercom voice repeats its soothing message, now adding that a medical team is on the way. Mark calls into it, but all he gets back is the same recorded lines. Sally notices his injured hand and, explaining she's a nurse, insists on cleaning and bandaging it. Meanwhile, Sergei grabs a hammer and starts punching through the shared wall toward Enid's apartment. Once the hole is big enough, they crawl through and find Enid crumpled on the floor. She's unconscious but breathing. After a moment of gentle shaking and calling her name, she comes to, dazed but okay. Together, they move to her window and watch the street below. Hazmat teams are setting up medical tents and decontamination tunnels. Workers in suits enter buildings, emerge with sickly, pale residents, and escort them to the tents. In other windows, they see people coughing violently. Sergei mutters that this must be some terrorist attack. Aiden mocks him, and the two nearly get physical before someone breaks them up. The intercom chimes again, and this time the calm voice announces there's been a gas leak in the area. As Aiden flicks his lighter to smoke, Mark snatches out his hand, reminding him that if there really is gas, he'll blow them all up. Aiden scoffs, saying it's a cover story. Out on the windowsill, a lone mosquito twitches and drops dead. Hours crawl by. More residents are dragged out and taken to tents. One man being escorted suddenly bolts and runs. He makes it only a few steps before a sniper hidden somewhere outside shoots him dead. Everyone watching from their windows recoils in horror as the man's family screams on the street. Later, Hazmat workers start forcing their way into other buildings, battering doors, and pulling residents out whether they like it or not. Mark realizes they will eventually come for them, too, and insists they need to escape before that happens. Most of the group, even a scared Aiden, reluctantly agrees. Mark remembers he has corrosive chemicals he uses for his art. He mixes a small batch in a bucket and splashes it over the sealed doorframe. The material begins to bubble and melt, releasing thick, stinging smoke. Everyone covers their faces, coughing, and once the fumes clear enough, they push hard against the door. It still doesn't budge. From below, they hear shouting and heavy footsteps. The hazmat teams have entered the building. Outside, more residents try to flee and are shot or tackled. One worker is even stabbed by a desperate neighbor. They throw themselves against the door once more, and this time it finally gives way. As they argue about where to go next, they suddenly realize Niku is missing. While the others search the flats, Niku crawls through air vents, peeking out through a grate. He witnesses a woman fighting the hazmat team at her door, refusing to be sedated. She staggers, collapses, and one worker notes she's level 3, meaning she'll be left in place and her flat resealed. Sergei eventually finds Niku in the vent and tosses down sheets, telling him to climb up. Before Niku can grab them, the noise draws the hazmat workers' attention. They spot the boy, pull him out, and drag him away. Sergei and Mark race downstairs. Sergei attacks one of the suited workers with a baseball bat, beating him so savagely that by the time Mark pulls him off, the man is dead. They drag the second worker back up to the flat to question her, while Mark checks on Niku in the hallway. Back in the apartment, Sally and Aiden are fighting. Sally calls Aiden cold and selfish. He responds with mockery, and in anger she hurls his phone to the floor. Sergei returns hauling the worker in. He slams her against the window and tapes up a sign, "We got one." Neighbors in surrounding buildings and the teams on the ground see it. They rummage through the woman's bag and find tear gas grenades and other equipment. Sergei ties her up while, over the radio on her shoulder, someone urgently reports that the situation is spiraling out of control. Mark takes the radio and tries to reason with the person on the other end, but they refuse to speak to a civilian and demand to talk to their colleague. As Mark moves to hand the radio over, Sergei snatches it and demands answers instead. The line erupts in shouts and chaos. Then the connection cuts. Mark kneels by the captured worker and speaks more gently. She introduces herself as Hazel and insists that her team is trying to help, not hurt, and they only carry weapons for self-defense. She flinches and panics when Mark reaches for her hazmat hood, making it clear she's terrified of being exposed to them, not the other way around. Hazel explains a mysterious illness appeared in the area a month ago. They tried to quarantine it, but it spread rapidly, and the government chose to keep it secret to avoid mass panic. The disease begins with throat and breathing problems, then steals your sight, and finally shuts down your organs one by one. They've been racing to find a cure, but nothing is ready. Frustrated, Sergei rips open part of Hazel's suit. She immediately pulls out a syringe, but Sergei snatches it before she can use it. Under pressure, Hazel admits it's an experimental vaccine, untested, limited, and uncertain. For now, she says the safest choice is to stay inside, keep sealed, and wait. Later, the group debates what to do with the single dose. There isn't enough to protect everyone. As they argue, Hazel works at her restraints and manages to slip her hands free, making a break for the door. Sergei tackles her, and the struggle gets so heated that he lashes out wildly and ends up striking Niku by accident. The little boy starts crying, and everyone turns on Sergei, pulling him back and shouting at him. Time passes. Aiden keeps trying Hazel's radio with no response. He wants access to a test kit, so Hazel admits her dead colleague downstairs had one. They check the window, no hazmat staff in sight. Instead, a furious crowd emerges from another building. The mob spots Hazel through the window and starts yelling up at them. Moments later, the building intercom buzzes. Mark answers. A man explains that his wife is sick, his daughter has been taken away, and he knows they're holding one of the staff. He demands Hazel, insisting she must know what the vaccines are. Mark replies that Hazel doesn't have that information and urges him to find another worker. But the man says the last one they caught was killed by the mob. Now Hazel is the only lead. The crowd threatens to break in. The group refuses to let them in, terrified of infection and violence. Sergei smashes the intercom. Thudding and banging echo from the stairwell. The mob is trying to force the main door. Sergei grabs Hazel and drags her down the corridor, talking about throwing her to the mob to buy their own safety. Hazel warns that if he does, she'll tell them this group has a vaccine dose. Mark, Sergei, and Sally drag one of Mark's heavy metal sculptures into the hall to block the door. While they shove it into place, Hazel whispers to Aiden that she knows the location of a nearby checkpoint with more vaccines, and that he should leave with her at the first chance. But Enid and Niku slip back into the flat, so Aiden can't act yet. Soon the mob reaches the door and starts hammering at it. Sally tries to talk through the crack, begging them to calm down, but a man smashes a window glass, and a shard slices across her neck. Blood pours down her chest. Sergei pulls the pin on one of the tear gas grenades and tosses it through the shattered pane. The corridor fills with choking gas. The crowd coughs, panics, and scatters. They drag Sally back to the flat and free Hazel so she can try to save her. Hazel presses hard on the wound, tries everything she can, but Sally has lost too much blood. She dies on the floor while Aiden watches, stunned. Heartbroken, Aiden staggers to another room. The group wraps Sally's body in sheets. When they go looking for Aiden, he's gone. In the hallway, Aiden stumbles along in Hazel's repaired suit, taped where Sergei tore it. He injects himself with a stolen vaccine, then shoves a heavy sculpture away from the door and steps outside into the open. The mob sees the hazmat suit and assumes he's one of the staff. They swarm him, punching and kicking him. A sniper fires warning shots into the air, and the crowd scatters. Aiden lies gasping on the pavement. After a long pause, the sniper chooses and shoots him dead. More hours pass. The remaining group starts to crack. Mark tears up family photographs, raging at his helplessness. Sergei drinks himself into a stupor. They hear movement in the stairwell. Sergei opens a flat door crack and sees the mob moving upstairs again. Mark quickly shoves Enid and Niku through the wall opening into the neighboring flat and turns back, trying to untie Hazel. Sergei refuses to let her go and swings his bat, knocking Mark unconscious. When Mark wakes up, he's alone. Hazel, Sergei, Enid, and Niku are all gone. He limps to the window and looks out. A new convoy of hazmat trucks has arrived. Workers are connecting hoses from the vehicles into another building's vents. Thick, chemical gas begins pumping inside. Next door, Enid, Sergei, Hazel, and Niku have regrouped in another flat and put on masks. They rush into the hallway just as Mark, bleeding and furious, staggers out. Sergei tries to slip past, but Mark tackles him, pummeling him until Enid forces him off, pleading with him to stop. The gas begins seeping through the ventilation grates, hissing quietly. Mark says the only chance is to go higher, where the air is still clean. As they race up the stairs, they pass Hazel's lifeless body propped against the wall, the sign, "We got one," laid on her lap, her earlier threat fulfilled by someone else. A resident appears behind Sergei and grabs him. Sergei instinctively swings his bat, knocking the man down. Other residents crowd around, furious and coughing. Sergei begs for help. Mark realizes they can't save him and survive, and drags Enid and Niku away, jamming a metal pole through a door handle behind them to block the crowd. They reach the roof access door and find it locked. Mark beats the lock with a metal bar until it snaps. They climb the last ladder to the rooftop and collapse in the cold air, finally breathing gas-free wind. No snipers fire at them. Whoever was up there is left to avoid the gas clouds below. They huddle together under the stars, shivering through the night. At dawn, Mark wakes to find Enid's body stiff and still beside him. She didn't make it through the cold. His face crumples, but with Niku still breathing, He forces himself up. He tells Niku to keep his eyes closed while he carries him back down through the building. Every floor is littered with bodies, residents and workers alike. Outside, the medical tents stand deserted. The streets are eerily empty. A loudspeaker crackles to life, repeating an announcement. Everyone must stay indoors, and anyone seen outside will be treated as a possible infection risk. Mark pulls on an abandoned hazmat suit and leads Niku out, trying to blend in. Suddenly, a man from the neighborhood sneaks up behind him and grabs Niku, pressing a broken shard of glass to his throat. Niku elbows him and breaks free, so the man lunges at Mark instead. They both fall, scrabbling and grappling in the snow, each trying to control the glass. When it's over, both are lying still. Mark has been stabbed and is bleeding heavily. Niku rushes to his side, trying to help him stand, but Mark knows he's done. He presses his phone into Niku's hand and tells him to walk until he finds a signal. When he does, he should message Mark's ex-wife and tell her everything. Then he pushes Niku away gently and tells him to go, now. Once the boy turns and starts walking, Mark lets himself stop fighting, slumping to the ground. He dies alone on the street. Niku doesn't get far before two figures in hazmat suits appear behind him. One jabs a needle into his neck, and he blacks out. He wakes up some time later, inside a large tent filled with other children. Staff members move calmly between the beds, telling the kids that it's all going to be okay now. Niku clutches Mark's phone and stares at the blank screen, wondering if he should send a message like Mark told him to, and what will really happen if he does. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.